Hello, Dr. Shaw here, and welcome to another episode of Teaching Humanity Remotely. Today I want to talk to you about the limitations of fear. When I am most afraid, I need the most control. When I am not afraid, I don't need any control. The reason I need control when I'm afraid is because I feel so out of control. So I need to have an anchor, and that anchor is the sense of having control. So that's always a way that I can reflect and pay attention to my fear temperature when I see how controlling I am about a certain experience. So we all have that tendency, so it's just something to note and mark. But for me, the sense of well-being I have is when I'm not full of fear and I can just be in the world in a more free way. So for example, if, let's say, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose connection with a certain person in my life, I'm going to hold on for dear life. But if I just am with that person and I just get to be in the moment with that person without any fear, I don't have to hold on. I just have much more freedom to express myself, which is much more fulfilling. So sometimes when I was afraid in any kind of relationship, I would hold on so much more than the relationship required, and I would also hold on in a way that I kind of destroyed the relationship because of fear. That's the other thing that happens. So a way to pay attention to knowing that when I'm afraid, I start to live in a very small way, and that when I'm fearless, I live in a very big way. And not to judge which is better or worse. I mean, for myself, I personally feel better when I live in a big way and I'm fearless, but there are moments that I have fear. So it's just a matter of noting it. So the other day I had a friend who was in the classroom, and my friend is in a place where she felt like most of her life she lived a small life because she was afraid. And now she, after doing work for years and years and years and years, now it's coming together, and she's seeing, in fact, that she's like not afraid of things. And so when she has a knee-jerk reaction, like an old way of behaving that was when she was more fearful, she can look at it and she can catch herself and she can change that around. So she was watching her class react to things, and she was able to say, hey, you know what? I can see you're having a knee-jerk reaction and you're just reacting habitually to something, and is that really the best way to react? She could have a conversation with her young students. These were kindergarten students. She could have a conversation with her young students. And I said to her, it's so interesting because when I was a teacher, I did that all the time. Because my spiritual teacher, what I admired most about him was that he really practiced what he taught. All day long, he was in practice of living a life of consciousness and being connected. When he responded to anyone or anything, he was really there. And I thought to myself, that's the kind of life I want to have, where I'm not just reacting. If I am just reacting, as soon as I catch myself, I stop, I take a pause, I note my behavior, I see if there's opportunity to transform. I really look at that. So I got that model from my spiritual teacher. And when I was a teacher of very young children, I would do the exact same thing that my friend did in her classroom. She just had them stop and note and mark their behavior. And she said to them, do you really need to act like that? Is that really the way you want to behave, or is there another way to behave? And she really slowed them down. And she had them stop and pause. And in that moment, they were able to stop acting automatically and really change their behavior. And she was like, I'm doing it, so now I'm having them do it. And I said, that's what I did as a teacher. And I think that was the very best thing that I did as a teacher, is that we would have moments together where we were practicing being conscious. And I would always say that I had a better, more fulfilling life because young children were open to practicing their humanity with me daily. And I got to practice my humanity with them. And because I had no fear of being with them, I had more freedom to not be so habitual. And then I'd walk in the halls and there'd be all these grown-ups, and I would get more fear and I would start reacting more automatically. So it's very, very interesting to see this in my daily living. And so I want to recommend that as we grow and as we learn and as we see that we can behave in a different way, and that the more conscious we are, the actual behavior actually changes and we become less habitual, and we can see how we react in a moment, and we can, if that's a reaction that is just completely out of habit and it's not serving anyone, including ourselves, we can change that in the moment. Sometimes we can't, and then we have to look at that. But all of this watching ourselves and being present and pausing and noting and marking, we're allowed to talk about that. And as teachers, we really need to talk about it, because we're teaching our children the most valuable thing. We want our children to learn academics, to be intellectuals, to have intelligence, to use that intelligence for good and not for evil. So we want them to be connected to their life and seeing that their actions have a reaction, and we want them to have right action. So this is really a thrilling podcast for me, and I know that it's so important to be able to note and mark and pause and stop acting habitually if it doesn't serve us, and be more connected and present in our life, and how that can transform us. Until next time, please feel free to go to my Amazon page, Dr. Mindy Shaw Paperbacks. And as always, please feel free to write to me at learnwithmeremotely@gmail.com. Until next time, let's enjoy being in the moment as often as we find ourselves there. Thank you.